Chapter 16. Talk about coming full circle. Although Brug's confused glance showed the name the caster had uttered was unfamiliar, Rashan's shocked expression indicated the opposite. The hollow feeling in my chest reflected that look perfectly. Arturus, the archmage who cast his blight across the eastern continent of Lao, then unleashed a similar eruption across the ancient elven city of Nin. My mission was to destroy the final tome of destruction from which he'd read to create those two atrocities that wiped out untold beings in both places. And this wizard knew something about him. His expression softened, then he began to pace in a circle, his bare feet pattering against the stone-tiled floor.
I sense your disturbance, Shenhua. You know the Dark One of whom I speak.
I knew he was a dirty coder who'd taken a job with another gaming company and was having his pantsuit off as we spoke, but that explanation didn't ring as something I could say. I opted for, I've heard of him.
I would imagine so. After all, the cursed bastard caused chaos wherever he went.
The wizard cackled, then raised a single index finger.
But he had us fooled. He certainly did at that.
He gestured around him again, indicating the empty seats.
This was once a place of high honor, you see. High magic. My kind came here with the highest of purpose, the most noble of causes.
Yeah? What was that? Morgan the Grim waved a hand. Machini uttered a hollow cry as the vines around her body creaked and tightened.
Interrupt again, and I'll cut her to pieces.
His stony glare fell on me. I raised a hand, parted my lips to acquiescence, then thought better of speaking.
Better,
he continued his scholarly strut, and his speech came in high tones better suited for a classroom.
Now, where was I?
Morgan clasped his hands behind his back and peered skyward.
Ah, yes. We came with a noble purpose. Right. All that you know. The place surrounding you was once a fountain of scholarly debate. The magisterium of Solara. She who betrayed us and left us here to rot.
Rashan's chin tilted up, her eyes wide. She took a half step forward, then leaned in.
Yes, priestess, Morgan grumbled. Your divine source of grace is actually a traitorous whore. Blasphemer!
Rashan screamed. My focus went to Machini, and I expected to see her strangled by the vines surrounding her body, but the wizard uttered a low laugh as he completed his first revolution around the wide floor and turned to face us.
A predictable response, but I'm not one to hold your ignorance against you.
Ignorance? Rashan uttered. I know more of Solara's light than you could learn in 1,000. The wizard's hand shot up. Rashan's feet came off the floor. She clasped her throat with both hands. Crackling gasps uttered from her lips.
You know nothing.
The priestess levitated backward, and her back pressed into the wall. Her legs kicked in the air frantically. Then she crumpled to the ground with a dismissive wave of his hand. I hustled to her, kneeled, grasped her shoulder, panicked as she coughed a few times. Relaxed a bit when she peered at me with those big sienna eyes and nodded. I seethed, but the evil eye the Darth Vader impersonator shot at me when I turned caught my planned admonitions in my throat.
When we learned the many demons who plagued our continent derived from a being deep in the hinterlands of Cern, we left our university in the king's seat and used our magic to carve this place out of the stone on which you stand. Then Arturus, a devout man, or so he said, of such high level and accomplishment, strode into this very room and addressed us. He regaled us with tales of his conquests across the Noran continents we'd yet to even map. We were suspicious at first, despite his advanced level, but then he gave name to the being we'd come here to suppress, the one against whom we'd built this place to ensure his mortal form never saw the light of day, lest he rain terror down on Rubal.
May I speak? I asked. Brugh grunted in disapproval, but his neutral expression left me wondering if the utterance was about Machini trapped on the floor, or my weakness for asking permission.
Ah, that's better. You have a question, Shenhua?
You built this place to trap Holcrum inside?
Holcrum? No, you silly fool. We trapped Caym inside. The only reason he hasn't ravaged half the world is because we did. But the price we paid.
The wizard paced again, and I somehow managed to suppress the flurry of questions I wanted to spew. If Machini hadn't been writhing in the cracked jaws of a stone floor, I might have enjoyed the history lesson. Lore was my jam.
Even though we'd managed to fight off his minions and carve this place, the constant struggles against Holcrum's Dark Lieutenant took its toll. Arteris offered an answer to our dilemma. Together the lot of us came to learn mana weaving, and we turned our mana and spirit pools toward closing off Surin's depths to the rest of the world. If all went according to plan, we would seal it from the inside, then portal to the outside world. We would build another magisterium atop this dark place, and our descendants would keep watch. But Arturus betrayed the magisterium of Solara and turned us into his tools.
Shit, I muttered. The wizard nodded.
We realized our mistake after we sealed the lone entrance to the outer world. One of my brothers tried to open a portal for us to exit, but many of our abilities had become limited. We could no longer open ethereal gateways.
Nor resurrect each other, Rashan said.
The wizard glanced at her. So you've noticed.
She gave a single curt nod.
We fought the demons Caym sent with diligence. Then we carved out a tomb for our dead when they came in stronger numbers. Imagine our surprise when their skeletons rose and attacked. We were forced to destroy the undead bodies of our brethren. But days later, the tomb was restored. Then the skeletons reappeared in their coffins.
I thrust a thumb over my shoulder. Are you saying all those things we just pulverized?
Who just pulverized?
Brugh asked. I rolled my eyes. Are you saying all those things Brugh just pulverized are going to respawn? Morgan took on a stony gaze, staring past us.
You see the irony? The wisest men in Enora gathered together in Solara's name to suppress the Dark One's intentions. Then Arturus came to show us how we could achieve our goal, only to turn us into food to feed his power. The demons picked us off one at a time early on, then they swarmed the remainder. One of our mages escaped after witnessing what Caym was doing with those who survived and were captured, sucking from prisoners' bodies first their magic essences and then their life essences, just to empower himself. He grew in magical capacity, then in physical size. It had all been a ruse to draw us in and aid in his consolidation of power.
I scratched the side of my head. Man, that's a bitch.
At least he can't escape.
Doesn't matter, I said.
Doesn't matter?
The wizard replied.
Are you that stupid?
I shook my head. He's still commanding a demon army in the Plague Barrens. He's still possessing whole islands of men to attack us with. Yesterday I watched him crack their backs to form a floating replica of himself, then blow them all to hell to kill my people.
Blast it! Are you saying all these years he's been wielding his power as if we've never been here?
If he hadn't been mostly dead, I imagined his face would have turned an interesting shade of magenta. At least you kept him inside? The statement came out like a question.
Knowing he couldn't get out and we had no control over what happened in the outside world, we decided the apt thing would be to remove the source of his power. Us.
The wizard raised his wrists to reveal the wide gashes.
But when our hearts stopped beating, our lives continued. Our mana pools remained. He captured and fed on us one at a time. I was the last of my brothers to evade his grasp. He continued to send his minions, but I eluded them all these years, and my traps rebuffed their attempts at capturing me. They stopped coming years ago.
His chin lifted, and he rolled his eyes around.
How many years, I wonder?
Although the word traps was what caught my attention, I answered his question. About 2,000. Best guess. Morgan's hand slapped his chest, and he stumbled backward.
Has it been?
I nodded.
It really has been many lifetimes.
He gave off another loud cackle. Then he lowered his head and peered at me from beneath those bushy eyebrows.
And now you've come to finish the job Arturus left to you.
I shook my head furiously. Hell no, dude. I didn't even know you were here. I'm here to kill Caym.
Which is exactly what you would say.
The vine surrounding Machini relaxed, then creaked tight again.
Tell me, how did you get here?
I shrugged. I destroyed a tree of Hokum, then a portal opened in its place. Morgan's head tilted hard to one side, and I thought I heard something crack. His eyes flashed white, then that strange silvery line revealing his skull underneath passed over his face like a scanner light.
A portal, you say? Where is this portal?
Sorry, it closed behind me. When we stepped through, my party was separated.
Bastard put me in a coffin, Brugh grumbled. Ha! Morgan bellowed. If what you say is true, you are a fool. What, did you think you would just wander into the depths and defeat Caym in his stronghold?
I raised my shoulder in a half shrug. He had a deal with a leader in Rubal who supplied him with magic users to drain. We took the leader out and cut off his supply. He's lost a bunch of levels.
Genius!
Morgan bellowed as he shot a finger into the air.
Pure genius!
Thank you, I said.
But that means, are you saying he's been feeding himself with mortals from above?
When I nodded, he spat. Dust spewed from his lips.
Then he's found a way out. The mana weaves have failed. The shield has been lifted so his mages can open portals, but still, I cannot. He has cursed me.
It would seem so. It's been going on for a long time, as I understand it. I cleared my throat, then muttered. Although we've obviously had different ideas about what constitutes a long time. Morgan dropped onto his backside, lowered his chin, then shook his head back and forth. The vines surrounding Machini receded. She spider-crawled away and pressed her back into the low wall. Machini skittered around the seats toward her sister. Morgan either didn't notice or didn't care. I guessed the latter.
We were such fools.
Sounds like you were duped by someone with a dark mind, I said. A coder. Go figure. Remind me not to play D&D with that guy. He rested his forehead in his hands and spoke into his lap.
I tried to level up, you know. Thought I'd take Caym on myself, but when I reached 54, he recognized my plan. The minions thereafter were too low for me to gain XP.
That's too bad, Brugh said. I nodded agreement. Morgan dropped his hands to his lap and raised his head.
But you see now, the goddess did nothing for us. I was left alone here for centuries, fending for myself. Caym has toyed with me, and I can't even force him to kill me.
An idea occurred as I stared at the powerful caster. It seemed I could give him exactly what he wanted, and, if things went my way, he could even be free of this place that had imprisoned him for so long. Although the constant, ill-timed cackles and the strange way he comported himself left me wondering if having him out in the open was smart, no one deserved what he'd been through. Maybe there was hope for him. You know, Morgan, he'll open his lair for me. He's been calling me since I arrived in Enora, so I'm here at his invitation. He thinks he can harness my energy, but like I said, his levels have dropped. We've starved him out. He's been sending minion invasions on the surface out of desperation. If you fight with us... Morgan the Grim shot up to his feet like a gymnast.
You have access to his lair?
His greedy eyes jittered all around, like he was convulsing. Then his features slackened, and he lowered his chin again. Glaring at me, he raised a glowing hand.
But that's exactly what Arturus would have said.
My throat closed up, and if I hadn't taken half a breath before his magic gripped me, I might have passed out.
Morgan the Grim cast choke. Minus 20 HP. Dot. Minus 20 HP. Dot. Minus 20 HP. Dot.
My feet came off the floor like Rashawn's before me, but the way he slammed me into the wall told me he meant business.
I will not be fooled twice, Shenhua.
Oh, bloody hell with this, Brug grumbled. He bent at the knees, launched, then sailed through the air. The wizard released his grip, so I tumbled to the floor. He threw his hands up and conjured a transparent shield overhead just as Brug crashed down.
Brug uses Power Slam. Morgan the Grim casts Physical Ward. Brug destroys Physical Ward. Shockwave.
A burst of air shot across the stone floor in all directions as cracks in the stone floor webbed across the room. Machini scurried over the low wall, and Decini was there to yank her up into the higher seats. Morgan flew backward. Then his back slammed into the table. Its legs screeched across the floor and banged into the low wall. 3 chairs slammed to the ground and disintegrated as Brug brought his sword to bear and stomped toward Morgan.
You lost your wits a long time ago, Caster. Now, I'm going to give you what you've desired all these years.
Brug! I yelled. The warrior either didn't hear me or didn't care. I surmised it was the latter. The ping of a bowstring came from across the magisterium, then an arrow pierced Morgan's hand. The mage stared at it in derision. Amelia Horn stood at the iron doors on the opposite side, another arrow already loaded. Her face was caked in mud. The wizard dropped his hands and grinned up at the looming warrior.
Peace, at last.
Brug, I repeated. He said. After one violent swing, Morgan's head toppled to the floor. His dead eyes stared at the daylight flooding in from the dome above. Traps, I finished weakly.
Brug has defeated Morgan the Grim. You receive 7,491 XP. Congratulations, you have reached level 40. +1 dexterity, +1 constitution. You have 5 attribute points to spend.
My shoulders dropped. Damn it, Brug. We might have used that guy. If he set traps against the demons and whatnot, he could have shown us where they were. Brug kicked Morgan's headless body, then slammed his sword down to puncture the wizard's chest. Overkill, I bellowed sarcastically in a low bass game announcer's voice. My party members shared an expression that clearly illustrated their thoughts, but I ignored them. Seriously, man, we should think about these things. Brug gripped the sword with both hands, then turned his whole body as he twisted. For effect, he raised his boot and stomped Morgan's head, which disintegrated in a plume of dust. He wheeled around and glared up at me. That crazy old bucket of dust would have gotten us all killed. He was doing a pretty good job on you before I took him down. He ripped the sword free, pointed the tip covered with dry guts in my direction, then shook it a single time. I'll take my chances with the traps. That's what Giles is for. He might be the mythic, but I came here on a mission. Anyone stands in the way of that, guess what he got? I didn't come for money. I didn't come for glory. But God's damned, boy, it feels good to do some killing. A hungry glimmer shone in his eyes. Brug lowered his voice. Now get your wits about you, and let me know when you're ready to go. He turned to face Amelia, who descended to the magisterium floor. Nice shot, Ranger.
Thanks, big guy.
Amelia met me after I descended the stairs. I nodded a short greeting. Were you there the entire time? She returned the nod, but didn't answer. Scroll of concealment, or just that stuff caked on your face? She raised her shoulder, then dropped it, and again she didn't answer. Where did you come from?
I woke in a cell. Undead skeletons shackled all around, yanked at their restraints, hoping to get at me. All that chain rattling was driving me batty. Had to pick a lock to get out.
Another skill she hadn't shared with me, and I hadn't noticed in my HUD when analyzing her. Had I checked her abilities since we bound? That was the thing about having so many people at the Foundation. It was hard to keep up with who could do what. I'd peruse her abilities later. This, of course, assumed she hadn't found a way to mask any. Loose locks of wet hair spiraled from beneath a kind of watchman's hat into which she tucked the rest. I eyed the filth covering her face. Why are you wet? Where'd you find the mud? Long story. Destiny and Machini came to meet us, and I hugged my tank. I'm glad you're well. I patted Machini's shoulder, but she drew me into an embrace. Thank you for saving me, Gemini. All I did was get choked, but you're welcome anyway. Machini turned, bowed her head at Brugh, then threw her arms around his shoulders. The warrior jerked, then relaxed and returned the embrace with one giant arm. They uttered pleasantries. I looked around. Giles, Yakol, Liatra, and Priya must still be around here somewhere. Amelia, you said something about a cell. Was there another way out of it you didn't search? She nodded. Then we'll go that way. I searched the dead caster's body and came up with an unexpected treat. Wizard's Wand of Storms. Type, Wand. Level, 38. Slot, main or offhand. Quality, very rare. Durability, 84 of 100. 65 to 91 lightning damage. Plus 15 intelligence. Plus 14 wisdom. This seems like a fine weapon for Priya, Rashan said. I shook my head. She has all kinds of elemental damage in her repertoire. I don't see any affinity restrictions, so I think this might be a great weapon for you. What do you think? Grand fucking idea, Brugh interjected. The priestess and Giles and my old party wielded a wand and contributed significantly to our group DPS. Unless you're one of those passive healers, which I assume not, considering how you used your smite against the skeletons in that tomb. Rashan raised a defiant chin. I am not one of these passive healers. I bring Solara's wrath to all who would befoul her glory. She snatched the wand, then lowered her head and whispered, Thank you, Gemini. A fine gift. Amelia elbowed Brugh. Do you always have to talk like such a brute? The giant bent at the waist and kissed the side of her cap-covered head. To her credit, Amelia didn't so much as flinch. I am a brute, sweet thing. Always have been. The elf's lips quivered as she restrained a smile. I glanced between the two of them. The 60-year-old warrior, the ranger close to my age. My previous hopes that someone would appreciate her someday rang a bell in my mind. Maybe somebody already did. I shook the thought off and returned my attention to the level I'd gained via Brugh's brutality. You have now reached level 40, but your journey through Enora has only begun. Skill trees have now been added to your interface. You may spend 3 skill points per level gained, in or across any trees you choose. Each tab represents one tree. The sub-tabs represent branches related to the parent tree. While focus on one tree will lead to more powerful abilities, you might discover special combinations by spending points across branches that might prove beneficial, depending on your playstyle. New options are available in your Foundation tab. Your Foundation Foreman can now level all skills to a maximum rank of 40. Explore the myriad new functions in your interface, and congratulations on reaching level 40. You have learned a new skill, Tenkasuru. By speaking these words, you will ignite both katanas into flame. Awesome! I pumped a victorious fist. Skill trees! The timing couldn't have been better. That I wouldn't have to perform 3 swings that required so much space to set a sword ablaze topped off the benefits nicely. That both swords would now ignite? Priceless. I pasted the words on a virtual parchment, then slid it to the bottom right of my HUD, until I had them memorized. Amelia turned from Brugh and set a level gaze on me. Your mood changes with the wind, she sniffed twice. Or in this case, stench. Come, the sooner we're done with this business, the sooner I'll smell fresh air again.